Hi everyone, Robert here, back for some more Linux and a coffee. This morning I wanted to do a video on some monitoring software for your Ubuntu server. One that I've found that I like to use is called monitorix, and the reason I like that one is because it's very easy to set up, quick and easy install. The config file is pretty self-explanatory. It doesn't go into a whole ton of configuration, and it lays everything out in nice neat graphs, colored graphs for you to look at, and it monitors things like CPU usage, memory, hard disk activity. You can also monitor your PHP and MySQL activity on the server. You can set it up for things like bind requests, and also for your mail server, POP3 and IMAP, Dovecot and Postfix, all that good stuff. And it also shows you which ports are open or in use, how many users are logged onto the system. So it's got a lot of really cool functionality, and thing I like about it the most probably is that it doesn't require an Apache server to be running on your server in order to display the web pages. So that helps with security a little bit, because you don't have to have extra software installed on your server. So say you're running a bind server, a DNS server, well, you don't want to have to run a web server on it as well. Now monitorix has a built-in web server functionality that runs on port 8080, and so it's just that one package you have to install, monitorix, and then you get the full functionality, and it lays it out in CGI pages. So it's pretty cool. There's Munin is another one that people like to use that's real popular, and it's one of those that requires a client server setup, where you have to have a centralized server machine dedicated for collecting information and graphing it, and then you install the Munin client on all of your servers, which is okay too. But and then Nagios is another one that's very in-depth. It requires a ton of configuration, and it's pretty complex monitoring programs, so that may not be for everybody. If I was in a more professional environment, I would probably go with Nagios, but here at home, just getting those basic server functions laid out on the graph is pretty much all I need. I'm not concerned enough about it to have to receive text alerts or email alerts and stuff like that. Now, I'm not sure. You might be able to set up a email excuse me, email notifications with monitorix, but I'm not for certain on that. But I've never really looked into that functionality because I didn't really need it. But anyway, I just wanted to do a quick video here and show you how easy this is to set up and install for those of you that are just wanting a simple solution for monitoring your server. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I've got the terminal up, so let's dive right in. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we want to go ahead and add the monitorix repository to our sources list. And the reason that I like to do it this way as opposed to installing it manually, installing all the packages manually, is because if we add it to our sources list, then whenever we do an apt-get upgrade on our server, then that package monitorix will be updated automatically along with everything else. If we install the packages manually, then whenever a new version of it comes out, we'll have to go and reinstall the newest version manually. So it's best to go ahead and add it to your repository. So to get started, we're in the YouTube test server here. We'll go ahead and edit our sources.list file. So we'll do a sudo nano etc apt sources.list and our password, and then let's just scroll all the way down here to the bottom. We'll put a comment here, monitorix repository, and then that repository is deb space http apt.izzysoft.de Ubuntu, and it's generic universe. There's my spelling again, everybody knows. Okay, so generic.universe, and that's all we need to put in our sources list. So we'll write the file and exit, and then we need to get the key. So we'll go to our home directory and we'll do a wget, and that the key is located at apt.izzysoft.de / and the key name is izzysoft.asc. Okay, so we got the key. Now let's add the key. So we'll do sudo apt-key add, and it's izzysoft.asc. Hit enter. It says OK. So we've got the repository added, we've downloaded the key, we've installed the key. So let's go ahead and update our repositories. So we'll do sudo apt-get update, and now our repositories will be updated with the monitorix repository. Looks like there's quite a few updates there on it. Okay, so now that that's updated, let's go ahead and just simply do a sudo apt-get install monitorix, and we'll do a -y to bypass the disk check, and that's it. It's installed. So now let's take a look at our config file. So we'll do a sudo nano etc monitorix.conf. Okay, so in here is where you can adjust all your settings for the monitorix server. Here we can come down to title, and we could put something like, if this is for our web server, we could do web server monitoring or whatever. Host name, you can put your host name here. If you have a domain that you want to put at the end of your host name, you can add that as well. Theme color, let's see, I'm looking at the documentation here. I think it says there's two predefined themes, white and black. So now I don't know if you might be able to add others into that or not. You'd have to dig into the documentation, but I find that the black looks really nice. So, and then the refresh rate is the rate in which the statistics are going to refresh on the page when you're just sitting idle looking at it, and that's in seconds. So it's set at a little, like, what, 2.5 minutes, something like that. So which is not bad, but if you want it to refresh more often, you can lower that value. Like if you wanted to bring it down to 60 seconds, you could do that. The iFace mode, you can either do graph, which is the default, or text if you'd rather have text graphs. Zoom gives you the ability to double click on one of the graphs on the page, and it will bring it up larger into its own page so you can view it in more detail. Net stats in bits per second, says that it toggles the network value between bits per second and bytes per second. So you can set that to either yes or no, and it'll toggle between the two. Let's see here. Let's get something more. The temperature scale. If you want Fahrenheit, you can do that. I usually leave Celsius because that's what I'm used to reading on my servers, so I just do that. The show gaps, if you have a time where, say, the server was shut down or a certain service was shut down, you can choose to either show or not show those gaps in monitoring on the graph. So you can pick that option however you would like it to be. Max historic years, the maximum allowed is 5, and it's going to store the previous data, and it says here there's a RRD file. It'll resize that, and that's where that information is stored. And you can look at the page whenever we bring it up in the web browser. It gives you the option to select either month, day, week, year, whatever. So that's how you would pick previous data. And then the include directory, I believe that one is for Debian. It's got some other settings in there. I've looked at it. There's not much in there, but you can add other stuff to that directory if you want to make any changes. Again, read the documentation on all this. It's really pretty simple stuff. Here is the HTTP server that is built in. You want to be sure it's enabled in order to access it. It's on port 8080. Now you can change that if you want. User and group is fine. Should be set at nobody. And there's the log file. It gives you the option to allow or deny hosts. Up here under host, if you want the monitoring page to be accessible from a different host other than the host of the machine, you can set that option there. I believe if you leave it blank, it will just take the value that was defined at the beginning of the config file. And yeah, if you define one there, it will also take into account both. So host deny, I think, yeah, you can use the value all under host deny or host allow. You wouldn't want to deny all unless you defined a allow of the IP of the machine you want to access that. Now this can be set up with port forwarding to where you can access your monitoring from outside your internal network. I don't really ever advise that just because I'm a little paranoid on security, but if you want to do that, you can set that up to be publicly accessible. I think you can probably do a space or comma limited list here under host allow and deny. Yeah, it's just basic like HT access type rules there on host allow and deny. Okay, so let's see what else we got here. Auth, you can set up HTTP auth on this if you want to enable a password on it, which if you're setting this to be publicly accessible, you're going to want to enable this and do your HT password and generate a password file for the server. That way you have a login. You have to enter your credentials in order to view the page. You don't want it to be accessible like, you know, CNN.com or something. So okay, so that's pretty much it for the server. Real simple. Here it's got all of the log files listed for different functions like your mail log. It's going to read this information to graph it. secure, monitorix, IMAP. Some of these you may need to change depending on how you have your services set up. It does do squid proxy as well. It'll graph all of that. Fail to ban, FTP. Okay, now we start getting into the graphs. Here is a list of all of the available graphs, and you can either yes or no to enable or disable which graphs you want to use. Like we have system, kernel, proc, the HP temperature, LM sense. That's if you have LM sensors installed on your machine, you can allow it to read that information. There's even NVIDIA, disk activity, file sharing, netstat. There's a whole bunch of really cool stuff in here. You can go through, like if you wanted to keep track of FTP usage, there's your Apache, MySQL, squid, bind, failed to ban, even has a Raspberry Pi function. There's a lot of good stuff. So you'll go through here and enable which graphs you want to use. Okay, there are system alerts. Let's see how that works. Some of this stuff I have never used before, so I'm not really familiar. Let's see here. And this stuff's all in the documentation. monitorix. Just go to monitorix.org /documentation.html and it'll bring up the page that shows everything. That's what I'm looking at here. There's really not a whole lot else that you need to set up. Now you can come in here, like if you wanted to change your ports listing. Now this is come in handy because if you've changed your SSH port, then you'll want to come in here and change that. Like on our YouTube test server, we changed it to 1011, so we'd want to change it there, and then up here on the list we would want to take out 22, and then we would add our 1011 in its place. So, and you could also do that for FTP. A lot of times people don't use default 21 for FTP. I wouldn't, but you can change ports if you want to. Just be sure that if you change it here in the definition list, that you change it up top as well in the list of ports, I believe. Okay, so it says there's no limit to the number of ports monitored, but keep in mind that every time this number changes, monitorix will resize the port.rrd file accordingly, removing all of your historical data. So it's best to set this up initially before you start using that, because when you change that, you're going to lose all your historical data. Okay, well that's pretty much it. You can dig through all this and see if there's anything that you want to change. Of course, you'll need to read the documentation to know exactly what you're changing. There is the functionality down here. I'll show you to add. There it is. Multi-host feature. You can enable this, and here remote host, you would add your a name for each server. Like you've got a server 1, 2, 3, and then here you would define where it's the monitorix is located, or what server name. Like you can define it by host, by IP, or whatever, and you can read the documentation more on that, but we're not going to set that up in this tutorial. But anyway, you can use the multi-host feature if you want to add multiple servers and just use this one as a central monitoring server. Okay, so there's the email reports. It's just under the multi-host, so you can have it daily, weekly, monthly. You can enable all of that and just define up here what the mail credentials are to send to. So that's pretty cool. And then everything below that, it says you don't really need to touch, but you know, you might want to if you. That's up to the individual. But anyway, okay, so we've done all that, so let's go ahead and write the file and exit, and then all we need to do really is just do a sudo service monitorix restart, and that's going to restart the monitorix process. Now let's go to the web page and take a look at it, and I'll show you what that looks like. Here is what you're greeted with when you go to either your domain name of your server :8080/monitorix. That's how you're going to access the CGI page. This is the first page that you're greeted with. Now remember, if you have an active iptables set up on your server, you're going to need to allow on the input chain for port 8080, you're going to need to set up a rule for that, otherwise you're not going to be able to connect to the monitorix web page server. So but this is the first one that you'll see, and then you can look at the graphs here. You can pick specific graphs if you want to look at just specific ones, and you can pick daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. So let's just pick daily and just click OK, and here is what the graphs look like. They're really nice looking graphs. As you can see here, it's already started to graph activity just a little bit, but you have to wait until it's been running for a while to get a real good overview. But here we have our system load average and usage, global kernel usage, and it has little subgraphs too. There's a lot of stuff in here that you probably wouldn't think about too much. Like we've got memory allocation, active processes, context switches and forks, BFS usage, usage per processor on the kernel. Like this is a dual core server here, but input output activity. Here is network traffic and usage for our ETH0. It also has network packets and errors, and down here it'll show the current average. There's some really good information in here. There's our net stat statistics, and you can see here the different colors it lays out there, showing a closed listen. Like currently it's listening on 11 ports, and like let's see, yeah, like here's services, system services, FTP, SSH, Telnet, Samba, failed to ban. Here's some network port activity. Lots of good stuff there in SSH, all that. Users using the system, currently 1 logged in. That's me on the shell there on the terminal. Device interrupt. Now when you're looking at the config file, you can enable PHP, you can enable MySQL if you have those services running on your server, and it'll just automatically, when you restart the monitorix server, it'll automatically add those graphs the next time you go and view your web page. But anyway, that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot to it. I just wanted to kind of bring this monitoring software out into the open so everybody can take a look at it as a possible option for your server. It has a lot of good functionality. It's easy to set up, as you can see, and it looks good. I mean, you can like if you wanted to look at your network traffic, you can click on the graph and it'll pop open an external page here, and you can zoom in or out on the graph a little bit, but it shows the bytes, the time of day, how much network activity was used. You can click on the individual little graphs as well, like here's your network packets, and it'll enlarge those graphs for you. where you can get a closer view of what you're looking at. So really pretty neat. Anyway, this is kind of the one that I like to use because it's simple, easy to set up, and I don't need a whole lot of complex monitoring just for the servers here at home. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and might give it a try if you're looking for something to monitor your servers with, and see what you think. If you try it out, let me know how things went in the comments below, and thanks again for watching, and give me one of those thumbs up that's down there somewhere, little thumbs up. Give me one of those if you like what I'm doing with the videos. But anyway, y'all take care for now, and don't forget to subscribe, and y'all have a great day. Bye bye.